Welcome to Doctrine of the Hymns, where we explore the stories and doctrine behind the most beloved hymns of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm Todd Jeppson, here with my co-host Nick Wells. Let's enrich our worship, strengthen our faith, and delve into the music that brings us closer to God and Jesus Christ. Well, Nick, here we are. Episode 1 of Season 2 of our podcast. Can you believe it? Two seasons already.
A Season 2. And it feels so good to be starting again. We took a little break for Christmas, and I missed it. I missed talking about the hymns with you. So it's really good to be back.
Yeah.
This season, for Season 2, we're going to focus on hymns that teach the doctrine of the restoration. That's our target. And then we'll also let Season 2 take us all the way into Easter, where we'll focus a little bit on the Easter hymns, some of the Easter hymns. And then we think we've got some time still in Season 2 that we'll focus a little bit on another topic after that. But that's kind of where we plan to let Season 2 take us.
Awesome. And how apropos for us this is, where it's the start of a new year, the start of a new season, and we're talking about the restoration. The start of something new.
Yes.
So good. And we are kicking today off with an absolute banger. What hymn are we doing?
Hymn number 5 in the hymn book, High on a Mountain Top.
Oh, such a good one.
It's great. Yeah, I'm stuck on it's a banger. That is not the word I was expecting in this moment. But
Sorry.
it really is. It's a good, powerful song. It gets you going. It's really good.
I mean, immediately the image that comes to my mind is Mac Wilberg's High on a Mountaintop, where he starts with those trumpets every time. Just like come out blaring unapologetically, which is the great thing about the gospel. It's such an unapologetic truth.
Yes. The restoration is 100% about this is the truth. This is just what it is. We invite everyone to come, and that's what it is. Yeah. Sorry if you don't like it, but not sorry, because we got to go. There's things to do. There's much to do.
And that feeling or that sense of urgency, I feel like, was so well presented in especially those early saints. The author of this hymn, specifically Joel H. Johnson, being one of those early members. He was baptized in what year, Nick?
It was 1831. So he was one of the early saints. So 1831, church was organized in 1830. He was right there at the beginning.
That's amazing. 31, right at the beginning of the church, just like we're right at the beginning of a new year, right at the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. And he really had to fight for his testimony, just like any person has to. In fact, that's kind of how the outcome of this hymn came to be, was he was really wrestling with his testimony, with the ability to form a relationship with God. In fact, he sought the truth regarding God and whether Jesus truly was the Christ. Eventually finding his way into the church, he received the inspiration to write High on the Mountaintop from the book of Isaiah. He wrote this hymn in 1853. So this would have been 20 plus years after he joined the church. Yet it still took him that long to put to word his testimony. So I think it's okay to think back, if you're struggling, if you have questions, that's okay. Everybody does. The important thing is you don't let go of what you know to be true.
Yeah. He did a lot of good things for the church. I just did a little bit of research on him. He was a missionary twice in the early days, and he ended up moving west with the saints, settled 2 different towns in Utah. So Enoch in Utah, the town of Enoch, he settled that. And then there's another town called Johnson, which is apparently now a ghost town. I didn't look into it any more than that, but he also settled that one. Looks like that one didn't work out. But member of the church his whole life, and really cool to see the good influence he's made. So let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So
Verse 1.
You got it. You go, Todd.
Verse 1 starts, high on the mountaintop, a banner is unfurled. Ye nations, now look up, it waves to all the world. In Deseret, sweet, peaceful land, on Zion's mount, behold it stand.
The first thing that I think of when I read the lyrics for this verse is the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus Christ's words, ye are the light of the world, a city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Because it's talking about high on a mountaintop, a banner is unfurled. Well, a city set on a hill that cannot be hid. This is the same concept. This is the same feeling that the truth that God has established on the earth, the gospel of Jesus Christ, it is meant to be known. And so we're going to signal that with a banner. We are to be the light of the world, the city set on a hill that cannot be hid. This is supposed to be a known thing. This is not hidden away. This is not in the dark. This is known, and it should be announced. And we do announce it. We do the best we can. We have worldwide general conferences, and we have tens of thousands of missionaries out at any given moment, trying to tell anybody and everybody.
One of my good friends, he works in marketing for the church, actually, as his full-time job. And what they do, they post ads for the church. They post things on social media. They put things on park benches. They put things in ads just so people know where to contact the missionaries for the church, where they can learn more. I mean, we have websites upon websites. Google is free, people. It is very easy to understand the church. All you got to do is look. And I love that so much. Isaiah calls it an ensign to the nations, that banner. And he shall set up that ensign, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. That's what the gospel is doing right now, and that's what this hymn is talking about, is that gathering of Israel, that bringing together all of God's children, because everybody is meant to come back into his presence, to be saved, to fill of his light and his love.
We'll talk a lot more about that gathering in the second verse. So really quick, just while I can say this, while we are still on the first verse, I wanted to mention, it talks about high on a mountaintop, a banner is unfurled. So I got thinking about a banner. What is a banner used for? So I looked up a little bit, did a little bit of research, saw that banners really are used to identify, to signal, to show who you're following, or to identify yourself outwardly. You're communicating to others who you follow. And it made me think of President Nelson's lessons that he's given recently on labels. And I've got a quote, and I just want to share really quick, because it made me think of, especially when we were talking about Jesus Christ's words of, ye are the light of the world. Now, we know that high on a mountaintop, a banner is unfurled. This banner is talking about the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that the church, which is established in the tops of the mountains, because it was established in Utah in the mountains during the beginning of the restoration after they moved west. So while that's all there is this personal aspect which you can take for yourself, a lesson for yourself in this restoration message, saying, well, what banner am I following? What banner am I showing outwards to other people of who am I following? So this quote from President Nelson, this is from a message he gave called Choices for Eternity, a worldwide devotional for young adults with President Nelson. This is in 2022, May 2022. Labels can be fun and indicate your support for any number of positive things. Many labels will change for you with the passing of time, and not all labels are of equal value. But if any label replaces your most important identifiers, the results can be spiritually suffocating. For example, if I were to rank in order of importance the designations that could be applied to me, I would say, first, I am a child of God, a son of God, then a son of the covenant, then a disciple of Jesus Christ, and a devoted member of his restored church. He continues on. But the labels that he's saying that we should identify ourselves first to is, first, I'm a child of God. That's the one that we should do. And I think that should be a banner that we carry. It should be evident in the way that we live that being a child of God is our most important focus. Let's dive into verse 2.
Yeah, please.
It says, "For God remembers still his promise made of old, that he on Zion's hill truth's standard would unfold. Her light should there attract the gaze of all the world in latter days." I like this verse a lot.
There's so much in here.
It says, "For God remembers still his promise made of old." What is this promise made of old? And this is going back to what you were touching on in the first verse. This is the gathering of Israel. This is talking about the promised, long promised dispersion and then gathering in of his people. And there are a lot of scriptures that talk about
So
this.
many.
And I want to highlight just a few key words that I really, really like in here. So think in your mind that for God remembers still his promise made of old, that he on Zion's hill true standard would unfold. So there's a promise made that on Zion's hill true standard would unfold. So in the scriptures, Isaiah chapter 5, verse 26, it says, "And he will lift up an ensign," which is a banner, "to the nations from far, and will hiss unto them from the end of the earth. And behold, they shall come with speed swiftly." And then, so that word ensign, he will lift up an ensign. This lifting up of an ensign, the fulfillment of that, so the promise made of old, the fulfillment of that is the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then it says, "And will hiss unto them from the end of the earth." This is just a really cool thing. There's a bunch of scriptures that talk about hiss, and it's kind of like, it's how the Lord's going to reach out. And a lot of these scriptures have to do with the Book of Mormon. And I won't read all of these, but I can quote them here. So 2 Nephi 29:2, Moroni chapter 10, verse 28, Zechariah chapter 10, verse 8. Each of these talking about he will send forth his words and they will hiss forth as a standard unto my people, which are the house of Israel. So he's sending forth his words. In most instances, this is talking about the Book of Mormon and more generally just the word of God. This is the tool. The word of God is the tool that brings people to the banner, to the ensign. But then if we look closer at the ensign, this is also really cool. So we saw in that Isaiah 5:26, "And he will lift up an ensign to the nations from far." This ensign, there are some scriptures that talk about this being truly like in the mountains. Like this is very much a prophecy of the church growing from out of Utah in Salt Lake Valley, which is where the saints landed. If you look at Isaiah chapter 11, verses 10, 11, and 12, it says that in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. To it the Gentiles seek, and his rest shall be glorious. And it shall come to pass that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people. So here we're talking about, this is the second time he's recovering his people. This is before the second coming. This is the restoration and that gathering of Israel. And then verse 12, "And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four quarters of the earth." And then there's also another one in Isaiah chapter 18, verse 3. This one I find really compelling. "So when God starts to send forth his word and sets up an ensign from the top of the mountains, pay attention." Well, that happened. That's going on. That's what is happening with the church currently being headquartered in Salt Lake City, Utah.
So interesting. I love the imagery in these verses too, because you're absolutely right. When it talks about that hiss, immediately two things come to mind. Number one, I think about the scripture that talks about there was a great fire and his voice was not in the fire. And there was an earthquake, but his voice was not in the earthquake. And his voice was not in the storm, nor in the hurricane, nor in the wind. But it was a still small voice. This is not necessarily loud. But what it is comes down to my second thought, which is the fact that hisses, at least in the natural world, often come as warnings. Because you've got animals, you've got snakes. Oftentimes a hiss is all you're going to get before you need to take shelter, before you need to flee to find protection. And I think that's really what the Lord is saying here is, I am giving you a warning. I am letting you know that you are going to need this. This is where your salvation is coming from. And so I'm glad you brought up that imagery. It's so great. And that ensign, I love the story behind these banners. I mean, if you look at old military times before they had great communication, they had these banners, these ensigns, which were not only to say, hey, world, look at me, here I am, but in the midst of a battle where chaos ensues, where you might not know your left from your right, or who's your enemy or who's your friend, you could see that banner and you would know exactly where to go to be safe.
Oh, wow. Todd, talking about being safe. Can we look at the third verse? Because this is where it talks about being safe. Where we go to be safe. Like after the hiss, after the banner's revealed, what do you do? Where do you go to seek shelter?
Yeah. So let's jump into it. Verse 3 states, his house shall there be reared, his glory to display, and people shall be heard in distant lands to say, we'll now go up and serve the Lord, obey his truth, and learn his word. This scripture goes right along with Isaiah, which is not a shocker. This is where the author pulled his words from, the book of Isaiah. But in Isaiah chapter 2, verses 2 through 3, it starts, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains. Funny enough, what does Utah mean? It's literally in the top of the mountains, exactly. And shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. And many people shall go and say, come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem.
It is amazing to read those verses from Isaiah. So these were written 700 years before the coming of Christ, roughly. That's about when Isaiah lived. And here we are 2,700 years later, and these are being fulfilled.
There's a story that I love, and I don't know how anecdotal it is, but I gotta believe that it's true. Because when the Saints first came to Utah, it was not necessarily a U.S. territory. It was just back out here. Mm-hmm. So when they tried to turn it into a state, they wanted to name it Zion. Well, some of the politicians that didn't like that back in Washington, D.C. were like, no, we're not going to do that. So what did they do? They looked at the native people who lived here, and they looked at some words, and they found the word Utah. So when they named it, they were fulfilling prophecy, because Utah literally means in the top of the mountains.
That's cool.
And this was foretold back, like you said, over 2,000 years ago.
The beginning of this verse says, his house shall there be reared. So we know that the first temple was Kirtland, the second temple, Nauvoo. Kirtland was no longer used as a temple after they left. And to this day, it's still not used as a temple. And then Nauvoo was destroyed. And so here, the house of the Lord was reared for the first time indefinitely. It was made in Utah. So Salt Lake was actually not the first one finished. I think St. George was the first one finished, and then Logan.
And then Logan, and then Salt Lake.
And then did Manti beat it as well? So
I think you're right.
So I think St. George, Logan, and Manti may all have finished before Salt Lake was finished. It started before them all. And so here we have the temple, and it's to this place. So here the temple shall be reared, and it's to this place people will say, we'll now go up and serve the Lord, obey his truth, and learn his word. So where do we go for the safety? The hiss has gone forth. The warning cry has gone out. The banner has been raised. Where do we go? We don't go to Utah. We go to the temple. The temple is where we're supposed to go. So high on the mountaintops, a banner is unfurled. We see that. it means it's time to go to the temple. It's time to be close to the Lord. President Nelson recently has been saying some very powerful things about the temple. When he was first called as the prophet, if you remember, he gave his first talk to members of the church from inside the waiting room of the temple, because they don't record inside the temple. So he went as physically close as you could get. So it was like barely inside the front doors. We're right at the temple. And he wanted to use that as a symbol that the temple is where we need to be. And then in a recent General Conference message from April 2024, he said, nothing will open the heavens more. Nothing. Nothing, 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 he says. The temple.
It's an incredible promise.
Get that strength.
And the fact that the temples are becoming more and more accessible every single day. It just shocks me every single conference how many more are being announced and built and dedicated, and how much more convenient they're making it for saints to go to the temple. I mean, I remember when I first went to the temple, it probably took 2.5 to 3 hours just to get through everything, to get dressed, to figure out what you're doing, to get through the session that you want to go through. Mm-hmm. And now you are in and out in an hour, which is amazing because they want to give as many people access as possible. And then part 2 to the temples, they're not just for us. Verse 4 speaks on that and the importance of these temples. Nick, do you want to jump into that?
Verse 4. For there we shall be taught the law that will go forth, with truth and wisdom fraught, to govern all the earth. Forever there his ways will tread, and save ourselves with all our dead.
So it starts off, Nick, for there we shall be taught. We're talking about the temple. In the temple.
And it's important to recognize that the word endowment means gift. And at the temple, when you receive your endowment, when you receive the endowment, it is a gift of knowledge. So there we shall be taught. The endowment is being taught. Like that is what happens when we go through the endowment. We're being taught.
Yeah, exactly. And what are we being taught? The law that will go forth with truth and wisdom fraught. So this is God's law. This is his plan. The most true, the most wise, the most complete plan of happiness. It ends in the temple. And how wonderful is that?
And then going back to what you were saying of it's not just for us. Because then this verse ends, forever there his ways will tread, and save ourselves with all our dead. So this is not just for us. We see in Malachi chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, and he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. And Joseph Smith, about those verses, has said in Doctrine and Covenants, section 128, verses 18, for there, speaking of the dead, salvation is necessary and essential to our salvation, that they without us cannot be made perfect. Neither can we without our dead be made perfect. There has to be a welding link between the two of us.
Yeah. And I think those verses are actually even quoting the Apostle Paul when he's teaching the Corinthians, I believe, when it comes to why works of the dead are important. It's because it's not that we can't be saved, but it's the fact that heaven wouldn't be heaven without everybody, We have to give everybody the opportunity. Salvation is necessary and essential to ours, that they without us cannot be made perfect, so the dead are relying on us to make sure that we keep those covenants for them. But neither can we, without our dead, be made perfect, to be made whole. Yet with temples, that's made possible, that everybody can return to God's presence.
Going back to the beginning of what we were talking about with this hymn, that it's so powerful and it is so ennobling. Just the doctrines that it's teaching, that the church has been restored, the gospel is being preached, the hiss has gone forth, the banner is erected. It's time. Now is the time to come. I heard This was the most shocking thing to me. President Nelson, in one of his talks recently, said the phrase in a specific context, but he said the phrase, time is running out. A prophet has said time is running out? Are we taking this seriously? Are we realizing that Jesus Christ is coming? The signals have all been given that the restoration is happening, is happening.
Yeah.
This hymn just teaches this, just presents all of these ideas so well. And then you put it with the really powerful music. It is very encouraging after listening to this hymn to go and do.
Get excited, people. These are exciting times that we live in. As tumultuous and as scary and as uncertain as they may be, there is certainty and there is peace found within the gospel of Jesus Christ. How wonderful that is.
It's good.
I am so excited that we're talking about the restoration this season. It is where my testimony lies. It is where I found a testimony of the gospel. And I am so grateful for it. I'm so excited to talk about it, to share some of my most beloved hymns and scriptures, to bear testimony of it, to bear witness that it is true, is where we find joy and peace.
And we're at time for today.
Yeah.
But this has been so good. And I'm so excited for next week to continue on the restoration. Next week, we are going to go over the hymn Joseph Smith's First Prayer. So hymn number 26.
What a better way to talk about this than to go from the very beginning, where it all started.
Yeah. So something new that we're going to add this season as well is in the description of this podcast, we're going to drop a link to the hymn High on a Mountaintop. So right now you're ready to listen to it, go ahead and just find the description, click on that link, and it'll take you over and you can go listen to it right now. And think about the messages that have been taught and the things that we've all learned. It's a powerful hymn.
Thank you again. And we will see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.